This morning, just a quick poll, looking at my congregation. You've seen games where the idea is you stand up when you've got something in common with somebody else. How many of you right now are wearing hearing aids? 1, 2, 3, 4. I was expecting to see more hands than that. That's only 5 or 6 of us. I love my hearing aids. All you see is a couple little wires, and because my hair and temples of my beard have gone white, you don't even notice the wire. It just looks like I've got a weird hair that's gone out of place. That's fine. They're so small. What I love about my hearing aids is that they're Bluetooth compatible, which means that without me having to have any extra wires, and they're rechargeable. So I don't have to fiddle with the batteries they used to. They're not these big clunky things that make me look like I'm wearing something weird or that I've got a tick in my ear, which is gross. And you know, they're very discreet, very easy to hide, very easy to work with. And the Bluetooth capability means that I can listen to a radio show on my phone. I can listen to audio books. I can put my hearing protection headphones on while I'm mowing and listen to an audiobook. I can drive. I can do so many things that otherwise my brain would be pretty idle, or just, ooh, look at the squirrel. Ooh, look at that. I haven't seen one of those before. You know, that's what my brain normally does. It's a little bit chaotic. Give me a story to listen to. I'm dialed in. Time passes. Drive for hours and just love it all because I've got hearing aids. One of the other things that my hearing aids allow me to enjoy is the fact that in an environment with a crowd, such as a restaurant or an auditorium, where there can be a lot of background noise, a lot of distractions, young ears are able to distinguish and focus in on a single voice in the midst of a crowd pretty well. But as your ears get older, that ability to filter out the background noise becomes more and more difficult, and I can pull up my phone and push the setting for restaurant, and it happened just the other day. I was talking with people in a restaurant. I was having trouble tracking the conversation. I hit that button. 3 seconds later, boom. I can hear them, the family over here that's being ridiculously loud, don't matter anymore. The family down there that is competing so that they can hear themselves over the family that's being ridiculous, none of them matter. I can focus in and hear the conversation that was most important to me at that time. Last year, being able to focus in the midst of a crowd on the conversation that is very important to you is what the hearing aids allow us to do. And we've begun talking about how that in our relationship with Jesus, it's not about what he says to everybody, it's what he's saying to you. It's a real conversation with a real part of God who wants to relate to you on a personal level. Last year, we began a series called Written in Red. And in the Written in Red series, the principal idea was that what Jesus actually said is very important, so important that many of our translations of the Bible have it written in red so that you go, these are Jesus' actual words, and they get extra attention. And so we began this series of looking at the bigger portions of Scripture where Jesus had something particular to say. We talked about out of the book of John, the Olivet Discourse. And if you want to know what Jesus' prayer to his Father was and is for his disciples, including you or me, you go to John. Chapters 14, 15, and a good portion I did what I was supposed to do. Technology. When it works, it works. When it doesn't, no, I've still got a red light here. This thing is just dead. We may need to get new rechargeable batteries. They may all just be getting old. Good question. And I am not at all offended that you asked me that question, because that is something that I could have easily done, but no, I did not. They actually looked different, and it wasn't a matter of, okay, the bad ones are in my left hand, the new ones are in my right hand. Which hand? No, I didn't do that. I can just work with this, Travis. It's fine. Sure. Yeah, but since you're here, take this piece of trash back.
Not that one.
Okay, well played indeed. Okay, so listening to Jesus, hearing the conversation that's important, the words written in red, giving us Jesus's words, it's not just about the actual words, it's what is Jesus saying to you through those words. And we avoided last year, we avoided the Sermon on the Mount because it's a very big section, and I wanted to cover some parables, I wanted to cover the prayers, but this summer we're actually going to focus on the Sermon on the Mount. And so we're going to begin that. This is kind of the introduction and laying out how it's going to go, and we will actually begin in earnest 2 weeks from now after our Memorial Weekend service with the Brethren Church. And so you guys are kind of getting a heads up on where we're going because it's going to be a little bit different. I'm very excited about it, but I want us to start by just reading a little bit together and talking about the big picture of what the Sermon on the Mount is. It starts off with what we call the Beatitudes. And so let's just read through these really quickly, and I want you to see something in particular as we read through these. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Do you notice the brackets? And how that with Jewish literature, Jewish prose, when you see a phrase repeated at the beginning of a section and at the end of a section, you begin going, oh, this was particularly put together that this was to be understood as a package. Now, depending on where you are right now in your life, what storms you might be facing, you might be one of those who are mourning. You might be one who is struggling to be a peacemaker. You might be one who feels despised and put down because you are poor in spirit. Jesus is speaking not to everyone or everything. He is speaking to you based on where you are in your life. And my guess is that you could find one of these Beatitudes and go, oh, that applies to me. It's not easy being the kind of people that Jesus wants us to be. And when we look at the Sermon on the Mount, a lot of times we just pick and choose the particular little gems that are in it that jump out to us. We might really enjoy the Beatitudes. We might really enjoy the Lord's Prayer. We might really go, well, where is that golden rule found? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Where is the Sermon on the Mount? Lots of little gems. Well, where's that song that we used to sing when we were kids? The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built... Where's that? Sermon on the Mount. And lots of other things. But the Sermon on the Mount isn't just Jesus's best hits, his most quotable quotes, his simplest paraphrases. There's lots that he has in that, and there's lots that we discuss trying to get the framework of the big picture of who was this group that went up. It says the disciples. Did he mean just the 12 disciples with him? Did he mean the 40? Did he mean the 70? Or when it says that there was a crowd of people, are we talking about the same mountain where he fed the 5,000? It's debatable. And especially if you take the idea that maybe this was more of a stump speech, where Jesus had this list of things that he often spoke about,
And Matthew recorded one time, these are the hits that he played during that one time, but he modified it depending on who he was speaking to. There are lots of details about how we understand this, but ultimately, what's most important is, what is he saying to you? We can spend a lot of time talking about the structure of the whole sermon, but if in the end you are able to fill in all of the college level questions about the structure of the Sermon on the Mount, pick up all the parenthetical comments, hit the high points, point out that the Lord's Prayer is at the exact middle of the entire sermon and is the focal point of the whole sermon, you might get all of those answers right, but if you can't hear Jesus speaking to you, you've missed the most important part of why the words written in red matter. We can be very academic in our pursuit of understanding Jesus and not very practical if we don't get to the point where we hear him speaking to us. And that's what we're going to be focusing on this summer. But the structure does matter. The way the whole sermon fits together does make a difference. If you have not gone to the Bible Project and looked at some of the materials there is a wealth of well-presented ideas, and because their words are not inspired, these are educated people doing their best to give a big picture of how the Sermon on the Mount is laid out. They've got every single book of the Bible laid out in pictures, as well as an explanation that's very easy to follow, very concise. I highly recommend the Bible Project. And they break the Sermon in the Mount down into 11 parts. Well, kind of 11. They actually start with 3 parts in the typical 3-point sermon type of thing, where you've got the introduction, then you've got the body, and then you've got the conclusion. And even to this day, college professors will tell the new pastors, when you go to preach, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. And the intro, the body, the conclusion. And if you can tie that to a point of action for them to apply, bonus. And so we still use this basic idea, but the Bible Project points out that in the body of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus has 3 major topics. There is Jesus as he relates to the law. I come not to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law. What's that look like for the people who belong to Jesus? Then worship, and when you bring your tithes, when you give to the poor, do it this way. When you are in an activity of worship, what's that supposed to look like for the people who are the people of Jesus? And then in regard to the focus, why should you worry about what you're going to wear or what you're going to eat? Don't you know that the birds of the air are well fed and the flowers of the field have plenty of really nice clothes to wear? Why are you worrying when you have so little power? These are all things that fit into the 3 parts of the body: the law, worship, and what's getting your attention, your focus. And so this makes up the body. But then they would say, too, that the body itself is broken down. Each one of those 3 sections is broken into 3 even smaller sections. And so by the time you've divided the 3 by 3 and added on the 2, one on the beginning and one on the end, you now have 11 parts. And we're going to use these 11 parts for our 11-part sermon series through the summer. You throw in some holidays, you throw in a couple of vacation days, and suddenly we're all the way out to Labor Day at the end of the summer with this series on the Sermon on the Mount. So this is going to take up our focus this summer. In the entirety of the sermon, however, there are 2 groups of people that he's addressing, and 2 major themes that he's telling to these 2 groups of people. And it's important for us on the front end to go, oh, I want to be part of that group, hearing those themes, rather than being part of the other group, having to endure those implications of what's going to be going on. The main theme is the kingdom of heaven. For the kingdom of heaven is like, and then Jesus would explain either in parable or in other stories, but he talks about the priorities of the kingdom of heaven and what that's going to be like. Kingdom of heaven, how do I briefly explain that? Do you ever get the sense that there's more going on than you are aware of? That there are influences in the world, and not just political, other human influences, but spiritual dynamics affecting things around you. You know, you've had the days when you can't win for losing. You keep trying the best you can and things keep messing up. And you go, you know, it just feels like the devil's out to get me. Oh, then you believe that there is a heavenly kingdom that is in rebellion against God. Yeah. We also believe that there is a heavenly kingdom that is in alignment with God. And because we believe in this spiritual reality, this reality of the heavenlies that influences our world, but is kind of in, around, and behind in a way that we don't see very well, because this was also part of what Jesus had to talk about, he focuses on that repeatedly through the Sermon on the Mount. Watch for the phrase, the kingdom of heaven, as you read through the Sermon on the Mount. But in the kingdom of heaven, there is one person who is above all, over all, and the most important, and he is not just the Yahweh creator God of the Mosaic covenant. He is our heavenly Father, somebody that we relate to on a personal basis. And so this idea of the heavenly kingdom plays alongside the idea and identity of God as a heavenly Father to whom we have a relationship, to whom Jesus himself had a particular relationship that he wanted to pass on to his disciples and the people that came after him. With these two major themes, he was addressing two major groups. The first often are referred to as the Pharisees. The Pharisees, and you go, the Pharisees, and what were those other groups? The Pharisees, Sadducees, Sanhedrin, right? The religious elites of Jesus' day, their success, their rapport, their reputation was tied up in things staying exactly as they were. The status quo was what they were there to protect, and religion was not so much a matter of relating to God, the Heavenly Father, but a matter of maintaining and protecting the status quo. And many of us, often when it comes to the idea of religion, we feel the hair go up on the back of our necks. We feel a little bit of the heebie-jeebies because we instinctively go, oh, I'm not a fan of religion, but I is one. I am part of a religion, but I don't like religion, because religion has to do with protecting the status quo, and God is about bringing change in us, and in us then changing the world around us. God is not a protector of the status quo, and so religion has a little bit of a tenuous relationship to those of us who are followers of Jesus. We believe in good doctrine. We believe in order. We believe in doing things that flow naturally out of what we believe, but ultimately we believe in the person of Jesus. And so this idea of the religious elites are those who are focused on the status quo. Now, I'll throw out too, in our world, in our day, it is not the religious elites. Okay, the Catholic Church got a new pope, and he's pretty instrumental both in a political sphere and in a religious sphere. He's not our pope, and so we recognize that, yeah, that's important, but maybe not so much to us. We recognize that the pull of pastors in a community is often dampened. We have much more political, and so there are political elites who Jesus would also have been addressing, going, you don't get it. because you are about this world and power and the status quo in this world and protecting it, you are not the people I'm talking to, because the people I'm talking to are just normal people. And some of them will have religious titles, and some of them will make a lot of money, and some of them will be very poor, and some of them will be very common. But what they have in common that keeps them humble is a nagging suspicion that there is a lot more going on than just protecting my life here and now. That there is more to understand about God. There is more going on around us all the time. That there is more about Jesus that we want. Those of us who are just normal people of all kinds of backgrounds who have this idea that what is only a shadow of what ought to be. That this earthly kingdom is a pale echo of the glory of the heavenly kingdom. And I am not satisfied with the here and now, because there is a home that cries to me from beyond the heavenlies, a home and a relationship with God that draws me inexorably toward something different than I am today. Protecting me and my reputation today can be cast aside and counted as nothing if I can just lay hold of the something more that Jesus has for me. Those are the people that Jesus is looking at, ordinary people who expect and want more. So, what is it that these people have in common? What is it that seekers want and expect that Jesus is especially addressing in the Sermon on the Mount? Let me point out something simple and painfully obvious. Getting up on a mountain takes work. The people that Jesus are looking for don't want to coast into the next. They pursue. And if Jesus says, I'm going up on the mountain, they say, let me change my shoes and I'm going with you. If Jesus says, I'm getting into this boat, they say, I'm getting in the boat with you. Jesus says, there's a storm coming and we're going through. And they say, we're going through with you. The people who want more are not intimidated by the work, the terror, the effort that it's going to take to be with Jesus when he says something important that they need to hear. Because at any moment when we are walking with Jesus, he may say the most important thing that changes our lives, and we go, why should I worry about my clothing? I'm spending a lot of money on my clothing. And you know what? I got a really great pair of brown shoes at a garage sale for $3. They fit great, they look fine, and I can do something else with that money that's far more important for where I will be in the future. I'm okay with that. There is a way of thinking about what is important that changes for those who are looking for something more, and they hold back resources so that when Jesus says, now let it go because I have for you something more, they go, it's gone. Those are the people that Jesus is looking for. The other thing is that those of us who want more always live with a question in the back of our mind. Now, sometimes we really struggle to figure out what that question is. But because we suspect that the here and now, the status quo, my reputation and my elite status in this world doesn't matter, we are always asking the question, if this is temporary, what is eternal? If this doesn't matter, what does matter? The questions drive us into a real education. You can go to school, you can get a diploma. You can go to seminary, you can get a degree. You can spend a lot of money getting little pieces of paper and letters after your name, but if you have no questions of your own, all you have are very expensive pieces of paper. You do not have an education. The questions drive us to a real education. The value of those slips of paper proves that you've got enough foundational understanding to ask better and better questions. But when you think that you are the person that everybody comes to for the answers and you no longer have any questions of your own, you have become part of the established elite who think very highly of your pieces of paper, but no longer do the work to pursue Jesus as the source of the real answers. We want to be those people who do the work, who follow Jesus, who find that he is the ultimate answer to every question that we have, and a relationship with him actually matters. It's not about the stuff that we get, it is about the relationship that we have with Jesus. So in regard to the questions, if the questions drive our education, for our summer series on the Sermon on the Mount, we're going to let the questions of ordinary seekers in our midst actually drive the sermon series. And so, what we're going to do is going to be rather different. I will not promise that it is going to be something we ever do again. I've got high hopes, I've got high expectations, but what we're going to do is cultivate the questions from individuals as they read through one of these 11 sections of the Sermon on the Mount. And I will be asking them, so as Jesus said these things to the people on the side of the mountain, if you had been sitting there in their midst, given your life experience, what question would you want to have followed up with Jesus? It's not going to be an expository way of teaching. It's not going to be systematic through the whole Sermon on the Mount. Y'all can read. Y'all can find the Bible, thebibleproject.com, and get background information. There's all sorts of information out there. But what I want us to do is to pursue the questions from an individual and say, if this was a conversation between me and Jesus, here's what I would want to have asked him following the Sermon on the Mount. I will do my best to have studied those questions ahead of time and have a reasonable, thoughtful answer, pulling in other passages of Scripture. I'll still be doing my work in prepping, but I'm going to let those questions guide where we go on a Sunday morning, and then I will have different ones standing up with me, and we will probably want to go to just handheld mics, I'm thinking, because our wireless stuff is iffy. But we will have a conversation, and I want it to be a real conversation. If you are one of the ones that I've already talked to about those questions, I don't want you to just go, okay, here's my question, blah, 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 and then just let me talk. I want you to act like I want it to be a real conversation. And because we have become conditioned to these podcasts, this idea of a radio interview, a TV interview, I want it to be a real conversation that you who are not up here with me sit in the congregation and go, well, that's not the question I'd ask. What I'd want to know is this. Or, oh, that is a really good question. It's supposed to be part of a conversation. And so that's where we're going with our sermon series this summer. As we wrap up, there is again this idea that you need to be very clear of. What Blackaby says in the Experiencing God study is that if you cannot hear Jesus speaking to you, you have a problem at the very core of what it means to be a Christian. And we need to cultivate that sense of hearing Jesus speak to us. Because Jesus himself, in one of those sections written in red, he says to the Pharisees about the legitimate shepherd that he had just been talking about, the shepherd calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. A few verses down, Jesus continues the same line of thinking and says, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. Do you know who those sheep in the other pen was, the other sheep that Jesus had to go to? Me, you. We who are Gentile Americans in 2025 are the sheep that Jesus said, I'm going to call them too, and I'm going to use these same words written in red. I'm going to use these same ideas to speak to them as individuals, that in the crowds that they sit, I will call them by name, and they'll be going, I just heard Jesus speak to me. I need to make a change. I need to change my perspective. Whether you are in the midst of a crowd or on the side of a mountain, out on a lake or in a garden, in a boat or in a house, in a storm or in the calm, with a fox in a box. No, that's a different story. Even in church, you might hear Jesus speak to you distinctly. It might even be in the midst of a sermon. But it takes you having the ears to hear, the eyes to see. Jesus said, I speak in parables so that those who have eyes to see will see. Those who have ears to hear will hear. In the midst of a crowd, Jesus is not speaking to everyone. He's speaking to you individually if you are in the habit of listening and hearing him. The whole idea of the Sermon on the Mount and the idea of what the words written in red is that in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus addressed a crowd, but he spoke to individuals, normal people who came earnestly seeking more from a heavenly kingdom. If you are one of those ordinary persons who sincerely seek more, Jesus will speak to you, and your questions will be what shapes that conversation. Those questions will shape our summer series. I'm very excited about this, but honestly, I've never seen this done in a congregational setting before. We're trying something that, because we are the people Jesus has called into relationship with him in Milford, Indiana, he says, I need you as a church and as a collection of individuals to say, it's not about being already where we need to be. And coming and saying, Jesus, take me just as I am and make me what you want me to be, so that in the end, I will be identified as the people who build on the rock, the people who face the storm, the people who in times of mourning are comforted, the times of making peace find that we are blessed. That is what we're supposed to be. And so that's where I'm hoping our series takes us this summer. Let's stand together and wrap up with the song, Just As I Am.